All right, so welcome to another deep dive. And today we're going to be tackling something pretty fascinating.
Oh, okay.
And this is a dating advice course that you shared that focuses on, get this, the alpha male perspective.
Yeah.
Now, for anyone unfamiliar, this approach basically emphasizes like confidence, assertiveness, and a certain degree of, I guess you could say, unconventionality when it comes to attracting women.
Right.
But before we jump to any conclusions or judgments, let's unpack what this really means.
Yeah. I think what I find really interesting about this source material is that it almost flips the script on traditional dating advice.
Okay.
It argues that men shouldn't be focused on chivalry or romantic gestures,
Mm.
but rather see dating as like a strategic game almost,
Okay.
where the goal is to win the woman's attention.
Yeah, it's definitely a departure from the whole like treat them like a princess
Yeah.
mentality, you know.
Right.
The study guide even advises against things like opening car doors or offering to buy feminine products, arguing that these actions can be perceived as signs of rudeness rather than kindness. It's almost like they're saying that niceness can work against you. But why would that be?
Well, the source suggests that women are kind of like subconsciously drawn to men who exhibit traits associated with leadership and dominance.
Okay.
So it's not about, doing those things. It's about establishing yourself more as the prize, not the pursuer.
Okay, so are we talking about like acting aloof and playing hard to get?
It's a bit more nuanced than that, I would say.
Okay.
It's the source really dives deep into what they call deference rituals.
Deference rituals?
Yeah. And these are subtle actions that kind of signal who holds the power in a social interaction. So, for example, who initiates contact first?
Right.
Who makes the decisions about the date?
Okay.
Even simple things like, who reaches for the check?
I see.
So they advise men to be mindful of these rituals and avoid, displaying excessive deference.
Okay, I see where they're going with this, but honestly, I'm not going to lie, some of this advice seems a bit, I don't know, manipulative, like playing mind games.
Yeah, no, that's a valid concern. And it's important to remember that we're simply exploring the concepts presented in this material,
Sure.
not necessarily endorsing them.
Right, of course.
But let's dig a little deeper into some of these tactics to understand their logic.
Okay.
For instance, there's a technique they call chumming.
Chumming. That sounds a little fishy.
Right.
I don't know why.
Well, chumming is basically about circulating in social settings with confidence,
Okay.
making eye contact, and just generally commanding attention.
So not exactly blending into the wallpaper.
No, not at all. It's about projecting an aura of self-assurance, making your presence known.
Got it.
And then there's also this idea of referral.
Referrals, I'm guessing this isn't about
Yeah.
job recommendations.
You got it. It's the idea of leveraging female friends and acquaintances to meet new women.
Interesting.
And the logic here is that women are more likely to be attracted to the man who's already seen as desirable and well-connected within his social circle.
Interesting. It's almost like social proof, but in the dating world.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so what about this low-hanging fruit tactic? That does not exactly sound respectful.
This is definitely one of the more controversial aspects, I would say,
Okay.
of this approach. They suggest kind of focusing on women in specific settings where they might be more receptive to advances,
Okay.
like holiday resorts or even, motel lounges late at night.
Wow, that seems a bit predatory. I don't know. Isn't that setting yourself up for like a lot of awkward encounters or worse?
Well, the source seems to believe that, by strategically choosing your environment, you can increase your chances of success.
Right.
However, they don't really address the potential ethical implications of targeting women who might be in vulnerable situations.
Okay, let's move on to something a little less ethically ambiguous.
Hmm.
The study guide also spends a lot of time on the importance of nonverbal communication.
Absolutely. Yeah, they argue that physicality and body language are just crucial for projecting confidence and attractiveness.
Okay.
For example, they advocate for developing a winner's walk.
The winner's walk.
Yeah, by observing, successful people, athletes.
Oh, okay. So like strutting around like you own the place.
It's more about moving with purpose and radiating an air of self-assurance.
Okay.
They believe that your gait can subtly communicate dominance and attract attention.
Okay, what about using touch? I've got a feeling this source has some thoughts on that.
You're right on the mark. They encourage men to use touch strategically to create intimacy,
Yeah.
even recommending massage as a way to build connection.
Hmm.
But this is where things start to get a little, a little
Yeah.
tricky.
Yeah, I can see how that could easily backfire.
Hmm.
Isn't there a fine line between being confident and being creepy?
Absolutely, and that's one of the biggest criticisms I think of this alpha male approach is, it often fails to acknowledge the importance of respecting boundaries and reading social cues.
So essentially, you need to be a mind reader
Hmm.
and an expert in nonverbal communication.
Pretty much.
It seems like a recipe for disaster.
There's definitely a potential there for miscommunication.
Yeah.
And this alpha mindset seems to assume a certain level of intuition and social intelligence, which, let's face it, not everyone possesses.
Yeah, it also seems to perpetuate this stereotype that women are somehow these enigmatic creatures with a secret code to crack.
That's a great observation. Yeah, this source does seem to overemphasize the idea of, understanding the female psyche as if it's some kind of puzzle to solve.
Right.
And it risks reducing women to a set of predictable behaviors rather than recognizing them as complex individuals.
Right. So while there might be some merit in being aware of nonverbal cues, it's important to remember that every woman is different, and there's no one-size-fits-all approach to attraction or intimacy.
Absolutely. Generalizations can be dangerous, and assuming you know what a woman is thinking or feeling based on, subtle cues is a recipe for miscommunication and potential disrespect.
So while they might have some interesting points about confidence and nonverbal communication, it seems like a lot of this advice needs to be taken with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
It's crucial to remember that dating is about building genuine connections, not just playing a game.
Well said. It's all about finding a balance between confidence and respect, strategy and authenticity.
Okay, so we can't just blindly follow any one approach without considering the ethical implications and the potential consequences.
Exactly.
But let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater just yet.
Yeah.
There might be some valuable insights here, even if we don't agree with everything that this alpha male philosophy espouses.
I think that's a great point. There's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah.
And it's worth exploring these ideas further to see what we can learn and apply in our own lives.
Let's do just that. Stay tuned as we continue our deep dive into this fascinating and sometimes perplexing world of alpha male dating. So,
Yeah.
picking up where we left off, I'm curious to see how this alpha approach tackles the whole seduction game.
Yeah, well, I think it's less about tricks and more about understanding, the psychology of attraction.
Okay.
This source suggests that women aren't simply wooed by grand gestures, but they're drawn to a man who seems like a bit of a challenge.
Okay.
Someone who's not easily won over.
So playing hard to get. I thought we were past those outdated tactics.
It's not quite that simplistic, I would say.
Okay.
It's about creating an air of mystery, keeping her guessing,
Okay.
and making sure she feels like she needs to earn your attention,
Okay.
not the other way around.
Honestly, that sounds exhausting. And how do you walk that tightrope without sending mixed signals?
Yeah, it's all about subtlety.
Okay.
The source suggests using vague language, delaying gratification, even withdrawing attention at times to create a sense of longing.
But wouldn't that just lead to confusion and frustration? Wouldn't it be easier to just communicate openly and honestly?
That's certainly a valid point.
All right.
This source seems to prioritize strategy over, direct communication, which, as we've discussed, can be ethically questionable.
Okay, so let's say you've managed to pique her interest. What's next in this playbook?
Well, physical touch plays a big role here.
Okay.
The source material encourages men to use touch strategically, escalating gradually from casual contact to more intimate gestures as the connection builds.
Doesn't that risk coming off as pushy or disrespectful? Where do you draw the line?
That's the crucial point. This approach relies heavily on men accurately reading a woman's signals, right, and respecting her boundaries.
Okay.
It's a risky game if you misinterpret cues or fail to prioritize consent.
So essentially, you need to be a mind reader.
Yeah.
And an expert in nonverbal communication.
Yeah, there's a lot of assumptions made. Yeah.
Seems like a recipe for disaster.
There's definitely a potential there for miscommunication, and this alpha mindset seems to assume a certain level of intuition and social intelligence,
Right.
which let's face it, not everyone possesses.
Yeah, it also seems to perpetuate this stereotype that women are somehow these enigmatic creatures with a secret code to crack.
That's a great observation. The source does seem to overemphasize the idea of, understanding the female psyche,
Right.
as if it's some kind of puzzle to solve. And it risks reducing women to a set of predictable behaviors rather than recognizing them as complex individuals.
Okay, so while there might be some merit in being aware of nonverbal cues, it's important to remember that every woman is different, and there's no one-size-fits-all approach to attraction or intimacy.
Yeah, absolutely. Generalizations can be dangerous. And assuming you know what a woman is thinking or feeling based on, subtle cues is a recipe for miscommunication and potential disrespect.
Right. So we talked about confidence, we talked about strategy, even manipulation. But what about the role of authenticity? Can you really build a lasting connection if you're constantly playing a part?
That's the million-dollar question. While this source focuses on crafting a certain persona, there are hints that genuine connection is still the ultimate goal.
Okay.
They suggest that men should showcase their best selves while still remaining true to their core values.
It seems like there's a bit of a contradiction there. How can you be both strategic and authentic at the same time?
That's the tension at the heart of this alpha philosophy, I think.
Okay.
It advocates for a certain level of control and calculation, yet acknowledges that, lasting relationships require vulnerability and emotional depth.
So perhaps it's about finding a balance. Maybe it's possible to present a confident, assertive version of yourself.
Okay.
Without resorting to deception or manipulation.
I think that's a healthy perspective. It's about showcasing your strengths while also being willing to let your guard down.
Okay.
Share your true self.
Right, because ultimately, who wants a relationship built on a foundation of carefully crafted strategies and calculated moves?
Right.
Wouldn't be more fulfilling to connect with someone who appreciates you for who you truly are.
Authenticity is key to any lasting relationship. And while the source material offers some intriguing insights into the dynamics of attraction, it's important to approach those tactics with caution and a healthy dose of skepticism.
So it's all about finding what works for you while staying true to your values and respecting those of the other person.
Exactly. There's no magic formula for finding love. And while confidence and self-awareness are definitely attractive qualities, they're only part of the equation.
Well, this deep dive has certainly given us a lot to ponder. It's clear that this alpha philosophy has its pros and cons, and it's up to each individual to decide how or even if they want to apply these principles.
Absolutely. We've only scratched the surface of this complex and controversial topic. There are many more nuances to explore, particularly when it comes to building meaningful connections and navigating the intricacies of long-term relationships.
Let's dive into those deeper waters next. We'll see if this alpha approach has anything to offer beyond the initial stages of attraction and seduction.
Okay.
So we spent like a lot of time dissecting the more strategic and, let's be honest, sometimes manipulative aspects of this whole alpha dating philosophy. But I'm wondering if this approach has anything to offer when it comes to actually like building a meaningful connection.
Yeah, it's a good question. While this source definitely prioritizes, tactics for attracting women,
right,
it does acknowledge that lasting relationships require more than just, initial sparks.
Okay.
They emphasize the importance of creating shared experiences that go beyond the typical dinner and a movie routine.
Okay, so instead of trying to impress her with like fancy dinners or expensive gifts, the focus shifts to like crafting experiences that foster a genuine bond.
Exactly. Think hiking, rock climbing, exploring a new city together, anything that involves a bit of adventure and shared accomplishment. These experiences create memories, and memories are the building blocks of a deeper connection.
That makes sense. It's about building a foundation of shared experiences rather than relying on superficial displays of affection.
Yeah.
But what about communication? Does this alpha approach offer any insights into how
Yeah.
have those deeper conversations that really foster intimacy.
Well, while the source doesn't delve into specific communication techniques,
Okay.
it does stress the importance of active listening. You know, showing genuine interest in her thoughts and feelings, and even revealing your own vulnerabilities to build trust.
So it's not all about projecting that unwavering confidence all the time. There's room for vulnerability and emotional depth.
It seems so. You know, they argue that a truly attractive man is comfortable in his own skin.
Hmm.
You know, showcasing both strength and sensitivity. It's about finding that balance between dominance and vulnerability, which can be surprisingly appealing.
That's reassuring to hear. It suggests that even within this alpha framework, there's recognition that genuine connection requires letting your guard down and allowing yourself to be seen for who you truly are.
Precisely. And that brings us back to the question of authenticity. You know,
Yeah.
can you really build a fulfilling relationship if you're constantly trying to project a certain persona?
Right. At what point does strategy become manipulation? Is it possible to embrace some of these alpha principles without sacrificing honesty and integrity?
Yeah, it's a delicate balancing act. You know,
Mhm.
this source seems to advocate for a strategic approach to dating,
Hmm.
but it also hints at the importance of genuine connection and emotional intimacy. It's almost as if they're grappling with the inherent tension between those two concepts.
Yeah, perhaps it's about using these tactics as like a starting point, a way to boost confidence and attract initial interest.
Hmm.
But ultimately, the foundation of a strong relationship has to be built on mutual respect, open communication,
Yeah.
and a willingness to be vulnerable with each other.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. You know, it's about finding what works for you while staying true to your values and respecting the other person's boundaries.
Right.
No one wants to feel like they're being manipulated or played in a game.
This deep dive has certainly challenged some conventional notions about dating. We've explored tactics that range from intriguing to downright questionable.
Yeah.
But ultimately, what are your key takeaways from this exploration of the alpha male dating philosophy?
Well, for me, it's a reminder that there's no one size fits all approach to dating.
Okay.
What works for one person might completely backfire for another. It's crucial to be self-aware, understand your own strengths and weaknesses, and choose an approach that feels authentic to you.
I completely agree. And while confidence and assertiveness can be attractive qualities, they're only part of the equation.
Yeah.
Building a lasting connection requires vulnerability, empathy, and a willingness to put in the work to nurture the relationship.
Well said. And perhaps the most important takeaway for our listener is this: be wary of any dating advice that encourages manipulation or disrespects boundaries.
Right.
True connection comes from authenticity, mutual respect, and a genuine desire to share your life with someone special.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, explored some controversial concepts, and hopefully provided some food for thought for anyone navigating
Yeah.
the complex world of dating.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating journey. Thanks for joining us.
And thanks to you, our listener, for sharing this thought-provoking material. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.